What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the podcast. Hope you're all doing well. This is the Cleveland Post podcast, and I am your host, Justin Harold. With me, as always, my co-host, Jeff Santa, and with a special guest today, Derek from DF Sports. We got a lot to talk about. We are in the speculation season for the Cleveland Browns and free agency, but like I said, we do have a special guest, Derek, and we're going to have him introduce himself and talk a little bit about him. So, Derek, what's going on, my guy?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Like you said, I'm Derek. I run the DF Sports YouTube channel. Pretty much, if you want to look at social media, it's pretty much all DF Sports. It's the same logo for everything, so try to keep it simple. Um, I've been running a Ohio sports-based YouTube channel for like, what'd you say, 2 years now?
Yeah, your latest or your oldest video is 2 years ago, and it
Two
was
years?
actually the Alabama versus Clemson review. But then you
Yeah.
have the Freddie Kitchens new Browns head coach as your second video, which is
Yeah,
pretty
don't watch
awesome.
that. That's embarrassing. That's back when I loved Freddie Kitchens and thought it would be great. Yeah, that didn't work out. But yeah, I mean, pretty much that's the story. Just been kind of covering the Browns, covering Cavs, Ohio State, just trying to do it.
Yeah, and you've been doing it for a while. And me and Jeff, we started sometime around May last year. We're coming up on a year. So, Jeff was actually the one who contacted Derek, and Derek actually commented on one of our videos in the past. And, as Browns and Ohio State or Ohio sports fans, we try to talk amongst ourselves and try to get as many opinions as we can into the room. And so Jeff was the one who organized this between us and Derek, and I'm really glad to have you guys on. So, Jeff, how are you doing, my guy?
I'm doing good. I'm ready for this episode. I wish free agency would have started like this Monday. We were trying to hold on as long as possible, but the actual start date for all the madness should be, Monday or at some point next week. There's going to be stuff with the ball rolling, but we wanted to get Derek on. We talked about it, me and you, and we were just glad that he reached out. We really appreciate that, Derek, because we've been, like Justin said, we've been doing this almost a year, which is kind of crazy to think about. But 40 plus episodes into the podcast, this market, like, it's not very big. There's only going to be, if you run Cleveland sports, if you run Ohio sports, I mean, there's only so many people you could cater to. We saw some interesting viewership from the Raiders fan base for one episode, which was
Hmm.
very interesting to see. But besides that, we literally have not talked to anyone else like directly in the community. I think some of the bigger Twitter names out there that I'm not going to get into now. But there's some people in the community that are pretty big. But we were just glad that someone else, would probably with the same views as us, same fandom, just reached out to us. It's awesome to see.
Yeah, and the one thing I like to say is partially, I know we were talking before the reason why I started, but in addition to that, I didn't say this. My thing is, as fans, we love to criticize the media. I think it's fair. That's just my opinion. But I feel like if we're going to criticize it, we should also do something to fix that problem. And even if it is something like this, you're not going to start off at a high viewership range. You got to build it up, but it's about fixing that problem. So, yeah, I love what you guys are doing. I think everybody should do this. I mean, if you're a fan, talk about it. I mean, you don't have to be great. I mean, I sucked. I still suck in my opinion, but you know what? You got to get better. And as fans, I think that's just what we got to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a time thing, and obviously you've been doing it for 2 years now, and we've only been doing it for almost a year, and it's tough. It's something that you have to get better with at time and with attempts and everything. So we're glad to have you on and everything. But so just to get to know you a little bit better, Derek. So you've been doing this for 2 years, but what is your oldest memory of being a sports fan, if Cleveland sports or anything outside of Cleveland?
Oldest memory? Well, I'll say this. The reason why, because I started off as big Ohio State. That was my introduction to the sports world. Because I used to live, I was born where Charles Woodson played high school football. And if you know anything about that area, it's Ohio State, Michigan. You live it daily, the grocery store, the gas station, it's everywhere. Like you can't avoid it. So I really started in the college market as far as viewership goes. And then I was introduced more to the pro game with Peyton Manning, because that was a guy that, because I really wasn't interested in the NFL as much. I would watch it, but I wasn't like pulled in. And, I've always been a fan of the Columbus and Cleveland teams. So I was, more of a distant fan, I guess you could say, because I really didn't care as much. I know that sounds bad to say, but uh, Peyton Manning was the guy that I watched and went, "Oh my gosh, this is football. This is how it's supposed to be played." So, yeah, as far as oldest memory, I guess if you're saying oldest memory, it would be Ohio State. I couldn't tell you when my oldest memory was. Um, but as far as the most that I'll remember throughout, being a fan, it's really Braxton Miller. And I know that wasn't that long ago, but he was just so electric and so exciting to watch. Like I talked about with Peyton Manning, how he just pulled me in. It was the same thing with Braxton. I remember, going over to my uncle's house, and I mean, clearly I'm a big dude, trying to run the football like Braxton Miller. I mean, looked nothing alike, but in my head, I was like, man, I'm the best. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
I got you. Braxton Miller was actually my entry into Ohio State football. And I guess I shouldn't have asked you oldest memory. I guess it should be most like prevalent memory. And I guess for you, it's something having to do with Peyton Manning. But I remember my first Ohio State game that I went to the shoe was Braxton Miller and Carlos Hyde playing against Penn State. And those were the only two players that were doing anything worthwhile to watch in that game. It was back before it was the Luke Fickell era, right after and right before Urban Meyer. So, but so if there's a memory, you've covered the Browns and everything. What is like the memory that serves most to your recollection of how you got into watching the Browns?
Well, as far as how I got into watching the Browns, I think the introduction of the Manziel era and everything he brought was kind of the wake up call, I guess you could say. But as far as the most recent thing, that Thursday night, Browns Jets, Baker comes in. You couldn't have scripted that better. Like that, I can literally turn that on right now and get chills, because it's like you see that jersey with the countless names, and it's like, oh my gosh,
Here
we
we go
have
again.
it ends with Mayfield. Like, holy crap. So as far as like the best recent memory, I'd say that, because
Yeah.
like I said, I think every Browns fan, you don't even have to like Baker, but I think that resonates with you.
Yeah, and I think what that story of the girl wearing the jersey with the countless names of everyone since Tim Couch is just ridiculous. And I think, when Baker came in that night, it was a really like, all right, is this going to be another one of these here we go again moments, or is it finally time that we found our guy and all that? So I want to kick it over to Jeff. And Jeff, kind of the similar question to you. I don't know that we've really talked about our oldest memories, or like what really got us into kind of like deep paying attention and getting into Browns culture. But what do you have a memory for that?
Honestly, nothing very specific. I mean, there's just so many things that, pop out in my head. Honestly, just kind of like how I was raised, like my dad just every weekend watching the Browns on Sunday, and just even though they were so bad, if for this, like even when we were younger, they were so bad, and he would just watch them every Sunday, every Sunday. I just have some terrible, dude. I don't know why I've brought him up before, but I have brutal Braylon Edwards memories. Literally, Braylon Edwards is like the before these past couple years. That's like the Browns to me, is Braylon Edwards dropping the ball. He was supposed to be this sure-handed guy coming out of college, sucked. No, I'm gonna be honest with you. The player that got me into Browns football, like I always like watched them, but the player that got me into Browns football, actually following them, which is a little bit weird to say now, was Josh Gordon. Just because of how he was like the one guy where he was like that year we were bad and he was top 3 wide receiver in the league, probably
Yeah.
top 5. Tough to argue if he was outside of the top 5. And his path in life has been a little bit unfortunate as far as the Browns and then post Browns. But I think Josh Gordon and right around Johnny Manziel. I mean, that makes sense what Derek was saying. Especially him being a college fan. If you're a fan of college, then you love Johnny Manziel probably, and you're excited that the Browns drafted him. I mean, we saw what happened, but still.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Derek brings up Johnny and you bring up Josh Gordon. Those two are playing in the CFL together, I think, or something
Yeah.
like that. Arena football. That's pretty unique. For me, I think about like I am super into the draft now and getting into like analyzing draft prospects
Same.
and free agency. And so for me, there's a couple years that stick out to me, but I think the year that sticks out to me the most is when um, it was the same draft as Johnny Manziel. I'm the only kid at St. Edward High School in a Sean Kinley class doing a portrait of a future quarterback that I hope to be in a Browns jersey, and that being Teddy Bridgewater.
Oh,
Has an awful pro day. Everyone just immediately starts slandering the man. Blake Bortles goes off the board. Johnny Manziel goes off the board. Who else was it that year? Who was the third one? I can't even remember. But Teddy Bridgewater ended up getting drafted later that round. But I just remember that night I was so upset because it was Justin Gilbert, who I actually really did like coming out of college. I thought that Joe Hayden, and the thing about Justin Gilbert was a week or two before the draft ever happened, Joe Hayden's on ESPN or whatever NFL network, and he's going through the draft prospects, and he's still with the Browns and everything, and he lists off the cornerbacks. He gives his top 5. Justin Gilbert's number 1. It's like, well, that's a good enough reason for me to get behind a 6'2" cornerback and having him come play with the Browns. But yeah, I think there's a point, like, because when you're a kid, it's just, going to the games is really fun. You don't really know a lot that's gonna happen and everything, but you might have a favorite player. For the longest time, it was Josh Cribbs for me. But I didn't even really know why. It was just he was a really good kick returner and punt returner. But besides that, it's I think there's just like a point in time where it clicks for all of us, and we kind of get into this mode of like, all right, I want to get into the deeper kind of folds of what goes on in the NFL and what goes down with a specific team. So, but I think we're gonna move on, Jeff. If you wanted to, queue
Hold
up
on,
some of these.
I got a follow-up question for Derek because I'm
Okay.
curious. I think I know the answer, but so it's like with some, pro, like you said, you were into college first, and then now, but you've had some years of watching the pros under your belt. Do you like college more, like a lot more, or just like a little bit more, or is it like pretty even?
Well, here's the thing. I think the reason why I liked college so much more earlier was because I think there was just nobody that I really like clinged onto. Like I said with Peyton, that came like a little bit later. But I think with college, like I said, you live Ohio State 24/7. I think
Right.
it's when you
And they're
grow up with
actually
that.
good too.
Yeah, and I think if I grew up in Cleveland versus Northwest Ohio, I think I'd
Right.
be the opposite. But yeah, right now I think it's close. I like the recruiting aspect to college because it's a constant cycle of guys. The NFL is as well, but you're looking at that 4 to 5 year contracts, and when you're a rookie, you also have the 5th year options, the tags. College to me, and especially guys nowadays, it's 3 years and you're gone if you're good. So I think for me right now, I think it's like maybe 45-55 college. Um, but hey, I mean, with the Browns, the bright future we have, it's creeping up there.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, you have all the years of failure, and even if you want to talk about the last 2, not this past season, but the 2 years before that is mediocre for the most part, and you just have Ohio State consistently being in the top top end of the college football spectrum. But yeah, I could have agreed with you a couple years ago on that, but I feel for me that now it's just the NFL, and it's 80-20 for me at this point, especially with everything that happened with COVID and how consistent the top 4 teams in the playoffs are for college football. So,
It gets
Jeff, how about
repetitive.
you? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is because just to, just to put your mind at ease, people from Northeast Ohio like are the biggest Buckeye fans too. Like
Mhm.
it's the proximity with us too, but I think that's more like I'm not sure if you're like a Columbus Blue Jackets fan, like if you're
Mhm.
big into them, but like that's
It's
way
where I
out of
live
our,
now. I moved
yeah,
down here, and I've kind
okay.
of adopted them.
That's like way out of our range. Like nobody talks about the Blue Jackets in Northeast Ohio, but everyone is either, there's a good mix, there's a mixed bag of people who, come in from other states, but most people, if they even watch college sports, it's Ohio State everything. Just that's why I wanted to ask because I personally I've always liked pro stuff better. But I know that's a pretty big debate. And I mean, it's very, it translates one to the other. So, I mean, I feel like if you pay attention to college, then I mean, then you'll eventually get into the NFL or vice versa.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think now we should get into the nitty gritty of why we're here.
Yep.
It
Yep.
is the Browns off season. We're 1 week away from free agency beginning Monday. I think it is 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Teams are allowed to start talking to players and make verbal commitments. Derek, what is the one position that you feel the Browns should address the most? What is the one position you think they will address the most?
The position I think they should is the D line. I look at the San Francisco 49ers and what they put together with the repeated first round picks. I think when you have a guy like Myles Garrett, you have to put as much time and investment into that position because of the value you have there. But as far as the position I think they'll value most, I think it's the secondary. And I think it's because of Joe Woods' background, and it just makes sense to me.
So do you still think that because I could have gotten behind that earlier in this off season, but now that they've moved on from Adrian Claiborne, do you still think that that's going to be because some people see that as a inclination that they're going to make a big move on the DN kind of outside edge rusher position?
I think the Adrian Claiborne move to me, I think it tells me more about Curtis Weaver than it does Adrian Claiborne. If you know
Yeah,
Curtis Weaver was a guy drafted 4th or 5th round by the Dolphins. I can't
fifth
remember.
round.
5th round.
Yep.
And they didn't want to waive him. They basically had to. He had the
Hmm.
injury. That's how the NFL works. They tried to sneak him through the waivers. Didn't work. So to me, I think the Browns, by cutting Adrian Claiborne, you're adding that extra 3 million, and 3 million sounds very small compared to when you look at JJ Watt, but that can go into, let's just say hypothetically, a guy like a Malik Hooker who's had the injury history, and you can pick him up and kind of throw him into that room. I think the question of what does it mean, I don't think it's as a big a deal as people think. I think the Browns will add 2 or 3 more defensive ends. I think it's gonna be one splash guy and then one where, because to me, like, I look at free agency kinda like Black Friday, right? And you might laugh at this, but listen, when you go into Black Friday, right, you got that 1 or 2 items that you're like, "I'm getting it. I don't care who I gotta run over, I'm getting it and get out of my way." I think the Browns and Andrew Berry, you look at last year, he did this last year.
Yeah.
So if you're a fan and you say, well, how? Why? Because we have that year where you saw what he did with Austin Hooper and Jack Conklin. I think Andrew Berry is going to do that same thing. And I think one of those positions, and it could just be one guy, I think that one position is going to be D end. Carl Lawson's name that's been popular. I think that I'd be on board with that. Guy that I really wanted was Yannick Ngakoue. And I think if you have a chance to steal him from the Ravens with what they're going through right now as far as contracts, um, I would love that. But yeah, I just think that because Adrian Claiborne got cut, I don't look into that as much as other people.
Yeah, that Curtis Weaver point is one that I've been trying to kind of talk up with other people, mainly my family members, because those are who we go to the games with. But I agree, Curtis Weaver. I think there was a recent update that he's been running again and stuff like that. So
I heard he's in great shape. I haven't seen pictures, but I've heard he's in the best shape of his life.
right, and that was such an underrated move of last offseason that kind of flew under radar because it happened during training camp, and with all the woes that was happening with injuries for us, it was one of those things that kind of flew under the radar. So I'm really glad that you brought that back up. So you said that you think it's going to be the secondary, someone in the secondary that you would address. Do you have a name, a guy out there?
Well, I think as far as secondary, what would intrigue me more would be a trade. And Marshawn Lattimore's brought up. I don't know how realistic that is. So is that a possibility? Sure. I'm not going to bank on that. Gilmore, to me, Stefan Gilmore, I think is the more likely because everything I've heard from Patriots fans is they will move him. I could almost, and I don't know how you guys will feel about this. I could almost see a player for player, David Njoku for Stefan Gilmore. I think it works for both teams. But as far as Gilmore, and actually, it would be kind of a similar thing either way. Whoever Gilmore goes to, it's essentially a trade and sign long term, or to whatever long term you would like it to be. I think it's the same thing with Njoku. He's a young guy that you're going to trade for. Yes, he's got his 5th year, but he's a guy you're going to trade for to sign long term. The Patriots need a tight end. I think that makes sense from free agency standpoint. Guy that I've always had my eye on is Trey Boston. I really don't understand how he flies under the radar so much. But yeah, he's a guy that I would like to get.
Gotcha. And Jeff, same to you. What position do you think the Browns are going to address the most, and which position do you think should be addressed the most?
Wow, Derek came with some heat from this
He
episode
did. He
because
did.
these points are wild. The trade for trade, I mean, that would be because I totally agree. And this offseason is very bizarre. Me and you have talked about this a lot, Justin. The draft for where we're at is, it's mediocre at best.
Uncharted territory.
It's very the whole thing. There's going to
So
be a
weird.
lot. It's very weird, but there's a lot of, it seems easy if you just take it from face value, go out and make the defense better. That sounds nice and all when you say it like that, but it's really not that easy. Andrew Berry might have the hardest GM job in the offseason, even though his cap space isn't that limited, which is kind of weird to say and kind of weird to think about and probably biased because we're Browns fans. But you got a lot of question marks that are just weird. Like the Claiborne thing, Derek, I saw your your small reaction to that when it happened, and you couldn't have said it any better, honestly. Like that's $3 million. That doesn't seem like a lot, but he wasn't knocking my socks off, and I was a bigger Porter Gustin fan at the end of the year. However weird that sounds, but I thought Porter Gustin played just as well in the time that he got, besides a couple penalties. But so Olivier Vernon he's a question mark, I guess, to some extent. That's something that Andrew Berry has to work out. We have Grant Delpit still, he's going to be a rookie. He's coming off of a pretty major injury and he hasn't played yet. So, that's a guy we got in the draft last year. Greedy Williams is like the biggest question mark around. And he's a guy that's going to be on the opposite side of Denzel Ward. Hopefully he should be. So, I mean, I think they're going to go for secondary too. The David Njoku for Stefan Gilmore straight swap, that would be unbelievable in my eyes. I think that's a steal for us just because how our team's built. I like Njoku. I think he played really well, but I also like the point Derek made about the defensive line because you saw it this year. I mean, your top 2 defensive player of the year candidates, Aaron Donald and TJ Watt. The Steelers, not a lot of help around TJ Watt by the time the end of the year came, and you saw his impact was, it's been greater than what we saw, especially in the playoff game. And same way with Aaron Donald on the other side. So if you could get another stud next to Myles Garrett on the other end, I mean, I wouldn't hate that either.
Yeah, I think so. 2 excellent points by both of you. For me, I literally just got out of an argument with my older brother last week. He's down in Cincinnati. I feel like the Bengals people are kind of like flooding his mind with nonsense and everything, but somehow ended up arguing for like maybe an hour about BJ Goodson and like his value as a linebacker with the rest of our linebacking core. I am huge. I feel like the entire linebacking core starting group needs to be replaced. I feel like Jacob Phillips is a diamond in the rough if he can stay healthy. Big if, obviously, with how he was dealt last year. But I just don't see that BJ Goodson is one of those guys that should come back next year as a starter. I'm really not on that train. Besides him being a really good tackler and a run stopper, when we were in third down situations, him being out there on the field was a liability every down in coverage terms. And so for me, free agency is really tough in terms of the linebacker position, especially someone in the middle. However, just yesterday, Quan Alexander from the Saints was released. He has struggled with injuries, but with Levante David being re-signed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I feel like Quan Alexander has shot up my list as my favorite free agent to go after. And especially since where we are in the draft is so kind of, you're in that back half, you don't know who you're going to get, and you don't know if Andrew Berry is going to be one to trade up and go after someone specifically. He might just draft best player available. And at 26, you're probably not looking at one of, Micah Parsons or Jeremiah Owosu. Yeah. And so if, both those guys are gone, then you might be looking at a cornerback. You might be looking at a safety. So you're going to need to attack the linebacker position because I think that's, out of all the position groups from last year, that was the most lackluster and the one that needs the most revamping. And so for me, I think I don't know that they will. For me, I feel that Andrew Berry will probably attack the DN position, whether that be with a guy like Hassan Reddick, like you said, Yannick Ngakoue, all these other guys. You got a lot of names that are in that, Bud Dupree, higher up kind of range that, are you going to pay them that top 10 or that top end money? I mean, you get up there with Miles making $25 million a year. It's a lot. But for me, I really think the linebacking position needs to be fixed. And I think Quan Alexander would be a very solid sign for me. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think about, what is the weakest position group out there for the Browns right now? Is it linebacker or is it the secondary? Derek,
who wants to go first? You want me
Derek,
to go first?
I'm shooting it to you.
I think the weakest is linebacker because of experience. Take out BJ and Malcolm. Mac Wilson is the definition of disappointment. Like that. And that sounds horrible to say, but for somebody who, was on Twitter saying, when people say we're the worst core on this team, we're going to prove them wrong. Well, great job, buddy, because you didn't. I like Sione Takitaki. I really do. I think he's a guy that has progressed, especially this year. Last year I was like, all right, this guy is going to be off the team. This year I can see a role for him. I love Jacob Phillips. Jacob Phillips, leading tackler on the national championship LSU team that had so much talent. The guy that goes to the Ravens, I don't know why I can't remember his name right now. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, from Ohio State.
No, not from Ohio State, from LSU.
Oh, Patrick Queen?
There you go, Queen.
First round,
sorry. No, you're good. When you have so much talent on a team like that and Jacob Phillips is your leading tackler, that says a lot. The linebacker position, and by the way, just throw this out here, I'm about the biggest fan of Delpit and Williams you'll find. So I have high hopes. Williams is a little bit different, but Delpit, I think he's going to take the world by storm. I cannot wait to see what he does. But anyway, as far as linebacker, and actually, I know we're running out of time, but this is I think the comment that I commented on your free agency video was the guy I work with, or I don't work with. I have talked to him at work. He works for the Columbus Crew. He works in the analytics department. If you remember, Jimmy Haslam bought the Columbus Crew. So in talking with him, he has said that he's worked, hand in hand with the Browns analytics department, which makes sense if you have two professional sports teams. He basically told me don't expect a linebacker before the third round. I think that is probably right, other than if they look at somebody like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who to me, he looks a lot like a bigger Jabril Peppers, a guy who can play that linebacker spot, but also you can throw him in there as kind of a box safety guy, cover tight ends. I like that. I like, I can't remember his name, Tulsa.
Tulsa,
You know who I'm talking about.
Zaven Collins.
Yes, Zaven Collins. And I like him because I think he's best from the linebacker position, but he's a guy that if you sign somebody, and Myles Garrett has to take a breather because we often see him, on the sideline for a playoff or whatever, which is fine. And especially since you got COVID, it's hopefully he can get back with that. But I think he's a guy, Zaven Collins, if you drafted him, you could have him be that linebacker position that you're looking for, because he's solid in coverage too. He took an interception to the house from, I think, like 70 yards out. But he's a guy you could bring off of the edge as well. So I think as far as the linebacker goes, the only two guys, and like you talked about with the Penn State kid, there's no chance we're getting him. I'm sorry. Unless we trade up, which I think is a possibility. I think the only exceptions would be Owusu-Koramoah and then Collins if they have specific roles.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, kicking it to you, weakest position group?
I'm going to have to agree just based off a talent argument that it's linebackers, because I know the talent's there in the secondary. It's just injured, and it was injured this last year. Like I said, Greedy Williams, Grant Delpit, that's a whole lot of firepower on your back end, along with, Denzel Ward, of course. But the disappointing thing to me about the linebackers, and this is the only real red flag that I have as far as like judging Andrew Berry has gone, is the disappointing severity and quickness of how quickly our linebacking core turned around, turned over. 24 months ago, in some time period, we had Schobert and Kirksey as our linebackers, and now it's like, I was also on board with Mack Wilson being like, let's let Mack Wilson flourish. Like, I think if you're an optimistic Browns fan in any sense of the words, that you were excited to see what Mack Wilson could do. Disappointment. I think, one of those situations where we gave him a leadership role that BJ Goodson, did a good job taking over this year, but we gave Mack Wilson a leadership role a little bit too early. And I don't know if it got to his head or if he just isn't really that good. But I mean, just it still haunts me that we could not have kept Schobert or Christian Kirksey, because I really don't think our linebacking core should be that bad. Like, I think we could have kept one of them, but that messes up the whole, Austin Hooper, play on the other end of the spectrum. But I felt like we could have kept one of them, and then we still could have drafted how we did, and we still could have had a put together secondary.
How do you feel about Kirksey coming back?
Dude, released. Oh my Lord, I love it.
I'm down. I was actually shocked when Green Bay cut him.
I thought it was a move to get JJ, but yeah, I mean, I would love to have Kirksey back. He was the version of Mack Wilson before Mack Wilson was here, who just, always on Twitter about his Cleveland pride and everything. But if I may, I am a huge Mack Wilson guy, along with Jacob Phillips. It comes with me scouting like the draft and like trying to find the gems in those later rounds. And, we took Taki before we took Mack, and I was so surprised about that, but I was really happy that we got Mack Wilson. I think what happened was, he had that knee injury in training camp. He missed a couple games in the season. And I really feel like they rushed him back, and he would come out on downs that I felt like he should have been in. But I feel like with a full offseason and him getting healthy, he'll have a bounce back. I don't know that they'll start him again, depending on who they bring in, but I'm right there with you guys. Linebacker is the position to address. But before we end this, one final question. Derek, I don't know if you know the list of players. I'm sure we all have the first name that'll pop to our heads for this question. But who is the one guy from our team that is going to be a free agent that you think we should re-sign? Priority number one.
Well, it's kind of a complicated thing because you can look at the names and go, that person's clearly better.
Mm-hmm.
I think each person's answer is going to determine what you think about OBJ. I think it's that simple, because if you say Rashard Higgins, then you're kind of like on my boat of, listen, I like OBJ, I do, but reality is it's just not clicked to the level it should yet. So if you believe that doesn't matter, they'll get it eventually. I had this argument with somebody on YouTube. I'm not even going to name his name because I don't want to call him out. I think that's just rude. But he was talking about fit doesn't matter. And I was like, fit is literally everything. Like, yeah, he's a great player. OBJ, love him. I have his jersey. I wouldn't buy his jersey if I didn't like him. But it's just something we'll have to figure out. But as far as who's most valuable, I'm going to go 1A and 1B. Okay. I'm going to say Rashard Higgins, but my 1B might surprise you. I think it's Carl Joseph. I think it's Carl.
Let's
what,
go.
do we agree?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
For me, Carl Joseph is kind of like the precursor of drafting Jeremiah Owusu, because I think that he's one of those guys that you can bring up into the box and play at that outside linebacker position and have him cover a tight end. But I honestly think that Carl Joseph is just someone that we should have at some point in the season, when we got Ronnie Harrison and we were so set on having Andrew Sendejo be back there at free safety, that we should have just put Carl in at outside linebacker and have him just cover on third downs, because as we've already talked about, the coverage was poor. But I'm sorry, you continue.
You're good. You know what? I'll tell you this. You know what my dream safety room is going into next year?
Let's hear it.
Free safety, Grant Delpit, obviously. Like I said, I already talked about that. Strong safety, obviously, Ronnie Harrison. Behind Ronnie, I'm looking at Carl Joseph, if we re-sign him. Behind Grant Delpit is Travon Morig, or the kid out of Oregon, Holland. I don't know why his name's kind of slipped down. But, and also if we signed a Trey Boston or Malik Hooker just for rotation. But I think, and I'll end with this, Travon Morig is a guy that if the Browns go out and get him, I think it would, first of all, take pressure off of getting another corner, because this guy, go watch his tape. He's one of the best coverage safeties I think I've ever seen. I mean, he's
TCU,
just
correct?
Yes, out of TCU. He just sticks on guys. So I think when you look at Joe Woods' defense and you look at his background, and when he's talked about it, he wants to use more safeties on the field. I think if you go out and you get a Travon Morig and you put him in that slot nickel corner coverage guy who can just kind of fly around, that frees up Grant Delpit. Oh my goodness. You watch out. That's all I'm gonna say is watch out. If Grant can just be like literally free, like I know it's called free safety, but if he can have that trust that the other guys can do their jobs, he's gonna be a Pro Bowler. Year one.
Wow, that's big expectations you're setting right there. I like it. And quick on Moorhead, first rounder.
So originally I thought he might be a top of the second round guy.
Yeah.
Now I think because of the hype, people are discovering who he is.
Yeah.
I think Yeah, I think he's going to be a late first round pick, maybe about where we are at. So yeah, I think if you're going to pick him, it's going to have to be at 26, unless you want to, let's just say it, if OBJ gets shipped out of town, and you have the ability to trade up with whatever you get from OBJ, or unless you get a first for OBJ, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Use that, package it to get up, and then you could have 2 picks in the first round. I think that would be insane. If Andrew Berry had two first rounders this year, what he could do on defense would be incredible.
I agree. Jeff, we're gonna finish it off with you since Derek took my 1B. So we're gonna finish it off with you and wrap it up here.
Okay, so I think the to-do list this right now, I'm putting the OBJ thing aside. That conversation I think is pretty exhausted. I mean, whatever happens there happens. Derek said it. I think you got to look at the Sheldon Richardson situation first, which I'm thinking that we are going to let him go. I'm kind of hoping that we let him go.
13 million in the cap.
Yeah, we're saving money, and I'm all for saving money on top of the money we already have. I mean, he was good, but he was never great. I never thought he was great. And I think I really do think that it goes Higgins, and then you got to start talking about a Baker extension, obviously. And I think if there's some cool way where Higgins and Baker always been buddy, if they could get on the same page, if we could get that news like simultaneously, like bang, bang, we signed Higgins and we extended Baker, that's like the perfect scenario for me.
I think to wrap it up, just quick points to wrap it up for me, off the Sheldon Richardson comment. I think it's a power move if you cut Sheldon and you sign Larry back because you can't let both of those guys walk, because then you're just creating more holes. I feel like you can get Larry for on the low. To go along with the Baker comment, Baker and Denzel are definitely going to get their 5th years exercised, which might spell doom for one of the 2 guys going into next season. Probably Denzel more so than Baker.
You think?
I think that when you think about the money that you're going to have to pay Baker after watching what Dak Prescott got and other quarterbacks that are around Baker's and everything else that's going on, and along with Denzel Ward, who, when he's healthy, is a Pro Bowler, there's a lot of money to be had between him, Nick Chubb, Denzel, the core guys, your 4 core guys. If you can, Miles, Denzel, Baker, Chubb, I think you got a lot of money that's going to need to be made, and I don't know that the Browns have all that. So
I think they'll keep him. I don't see any of them walking.
I hope. I mean, my God.
I know Baker's not getting Dak money. I hope he's not.
I don't know. The man has the same amount of playoff wins, but we'll see. We'll see. It's a topic for another time. Derek, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was really great having you. Just one more time, if you want to shout your stuff out really quickly.
Yeah, DF Sports on YouTube. Like I said, DF Sports, all social media. And yeah, I've started doing like interviews, because I used to just do it by myself, and now I'm like, I need to start doing interviews. So yeah, we'll talk after, but hopefully I can get you guys on too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure me and Jeff would love to coordinate that. And obviously next week will be huge. Hopefully sometime around now we'll have some bigger Browns news with free agency starting and everything. But without anything else to say, Jeff, you all good?
Yeah, all good. Just really appreciate it, Derek. You're the man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks. I really do appreciate it. I love doing this. Seriously, I don't care. I could have like 2 viewers for the last 5 years. I don't care. I'd still be doing this. It's just so much fun.
It's so much fun. And yeah, like Jeff said, thank you so much for being on, and thank you all for watching. Be like Derek, leave us a comment so we can interact with all you guys. We love it. Subscribe to the channel so you can get more of the content, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.